I joined the Army straight out of high school, and this was back in the early 2000s, before everything really kicked off overseas. I didn't have a scholarship, I didn't have a family business waiting for me, and I sure as hell didn't want to work at the feed store for the rest of my life. The Army recruiter showed up at our high school gym one day, talked about traveling and structure and getting your school paid for, and that was that. I signed the paperwork, kissed my mom on the cheek, and then hopped on a plane before graduation confetti had even hit the floor. Basic was rough, but I didn't mind it. Something about having a routine, about waking up and knowing exactly what I was supposed to do. It worked for me. And once I was through, they shipped me out to Germany. I was just 19, barely enough to buy a beer in the States, but now I was on the government's dime, walking cobbled streets in a foreign country, checking out castles and drinking real beer, and eating kebabs the size of my arm. I honestly couldn't believe my luck. The base was clean and efficient, like pretty much everything else in Germany. I was stationed outside of Kaiserslautern, and we had access to pretty much everything we needed: the gym, PX, bowling alley, even a movie theater. My job was mostly maintenance support for Humvees and light tactical vehicles, but I'd get rotated around sometimes, fill in wherever they needed an extra body. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like a career that was starting to happen. At that age, everything felt new and full of possibility. That was before the drills ramped up and before the accidents, before things really just stopped being fun. Germany had this weight to it, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just hard to explain unless you've actually been there. The buildings are older, the roads are quieter, and the woods are thicker. Everything's soaked in history. You can feel it in the air when you were off base, like the whole country had seen far too much and was just waiting to be left alone. But on base, it was different, controlled, clean, structured. I think that was just the Army's doing. You showed up, did your job, and didn't ask a lot of questions. Those first few months were pretty easy enough. I worked in the motor pool mostly, getting familiar with the Humvees, doing inspections and learning how to tear down a transmission without stripping the bolts. But when the joint NATO drills started, everything changed. Overnight, it felt like the base population had doubled. Brits, Polish, Canadians, even the Dutch had rolled in, parking their vehicles wherever they could find the space. A wall of tan and green trucks lined the perimeter. The mess halls got crowded. The lines of the PX were even longer now. Nobody was really sleeping well, but command kept saying it was necessary. Multinational readiness, they called it. The actual drills were fun at first. You'd get called at 04 to throw your gear on, roll out into a convoy to some godforsaken field or wash. It was wet and cold and miserable, but at least we were doing something. I was assigned a 4-man Humvee crew that ran simulated interface missions. We drive through pre-planned obstacle courses while other teams tried to intercept or slow us down. It was supposed to be about communication, reflexes, how we handled stress, but that day, none of it really mattered. It had rained hard the night before. Everything was really slick, mud deep enough to suck your boots clean off if you stepped wrong. We were in this wide drainage washout past the tree line, about 10 clicks from base. The idea was to run a series of speed drills, floor it from one end to the other while the opposition crew tried to cut you off. That morning, it was us versus a German team. Good guys, real serious but always respectful. I remember we were waiting for the signal to go down when our driver, a guy named Petrowski, looked over at me and said, "Bet you $10 they eat shit on the third turn." I chuckled and said, "All right, you're on." We all knew that section was a pain in the ass. The ground there curved around this collapsed culvert, and the mud had pulled really thick. You could lose control even at a moderate speed. We got the green light and they went first. We watched from the starting line, radios crackling with chatter as their Humvee tore down that path. They hit the first couple of turns fine, bouncing through puddles and engines screaming like a banshee. Then came that third turn, the sharp one around the culvert. I saw the front passenger side wheel dip far too deep, then rise far too fast. The vehicle twisted, the back end skidded, tires lost purchase, and just like that, the whole thing started to roll. It happened really fast. 1 second upright, the next it was flipping, landing hard on its side, then again and again and again. The gunner, Jesus fucking Christ, the gunner. He was in the hatch and not belted. Probably thought he was secure enough, just bracing with his legs. When the Humvee rolled, the weight of the entire frame caught him mid-spin. He was cut in half. Not clean and not surgical, torn. His torso stayed on in the hatch, and his legs were somewhere on the ground. It literally looked impossible. It was honestly just like something out of a horror movie. Everybody froze. Even the guys on the comms went dead for a second. Then people started yelling. Someone called for a medevac, but there was no point. You don't survive something like that. I couldn't move. I just stared. The top half of him was still upright, slumped over the barrel of the gun, like he might lift his head up and speak. His mouth was wide open, his eyes were too. And honestly, that's what got me, his eyes. They didn't roll back, they didn't glaze over. They just stayed open, wide and blue, staring straight across the wash like he was looking at his team. Blood was everywhere. It leaked from the wreck in thick streams, pooling in the mud and steaming in the cool air. Then the stench hit us a few seconds later. Oil, metal, piss, and meat. Not just blood. I mean it, meat. At least, that's how I remembered it. The medics got there fast. German MPs arrived too, and they sectioned off the area trying to pull the other soldiers out. One guy's arm had shattered. Another had a busted jaw and was screaming like a siren. But they were alive. But the gunner wasn't. They had to saw the rest of him out, and somebody threw a tarp over the Humvee. But I'd already seen everything, and I couldn't unsee it. We were ordered to stand down. Debrief would come later. For now, we were to return to base and stay off comms, and not speak about what just happened. That part was very loud and very clear. Do not discuss the incident over and over and over, like that would really help. Back inside the truck, nobody said a word. Petrowski looked pale, and my buddy Nunez lit a cigarette with shaking hands and didn't even smoke it, just held it and watched it burn. I kept seeing that gunner's eyes, not angry, not scared, just confused, like he really didn't understand what had happened. Hell, neither did I. We got back to base and were told to sit tight until they figured out what to do with us. Most of the NATO units were still out in the field, so the place felt half empty, like everybody else had just vanished off into the fog. That afternoon, they brought us in one at a time for statements. Nothing formal, just somebody from command asking the questions over and over in different ways. What did you see? What was your role? Did the German team violate any safety protocols? I kept my answers short. Didn't really have the energy to lie, but didn't feel like giving them anything else either. I just told them the truth. I saw the Humvee roll. I saw the gunner get torn in half. I saw his face afterward. That was enough. They canceled the rest of the day's exercises. Word must have gotten around fast because by nightfall, the whole vibe had just changed. Soldiers were now deathly quiet. Some drank harder than usual and nobody cracked any jokes. That kind of death, it just doesn't happen clean. It really sticks to people. We ended up in the rec hall that evening, just our crew sitting around a plastic table with half-warm beers and the silence hanging over us like a storm cloud. Nunez finally muttered, "Did you see it, his body?" I nodded. I didn't even want to say it out loud, like if I kept the words inside, it wouldn't actually be real. Petrowski threw back another drink and whispered, "Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna sleep tonight." They signed me up with a base psychologist 2 days later. Didn't even ask if I wanted it, just told me to report to Building 7 every Tuesday and Thursday for the next few weeks. The guy was fine, I guess. Quiet, clean-shaven, probably used to seeing guys like me come in with pale faces and 1,000-yard stares. I don't know if it helped, but it gave me somebody to talk to when the dreams got really bad. That was my first taste of how fast life can leave a person. One moment you're standing there, breathing that same cold air as everybody else, and then the next, you're meat, leaking into the mud. And that really never left me, and I doubt it ever will. I joined the Marine Corps because I didn't want to rot away in the same backwater town that my old man died in. I was never the smartest guy in the room, but I could follow orders and I could fight. MP school wasn't easy, but I made it through. I learned to keep things squared away, keep Marines in line, write reports, show up clean, and act even cleaner. For a while, it really suited me. I did a couple of stateside rotations, nothing too wild, then ended up landing at Camp Pendleton. And that's when things got, well, different. Pendleton's massive. They don't tell you that in boot, but it stretches across hills and canyons like its own damn country. I was posted to a law enforcement battalion and given housing in one of the older family units, tucked near the edge of the residential grid. A squat, sun-baked duplex with stucco walls, cracked tile, and zero insulation. Not bad though, really. It was nice and quiet. The first thing I noticed was how my neighbors didn't really talk to me. Sure, we'd pass each other every now and again, nodding politely, but it never really went further than that. No welcome to our neighborhood barbecues, no beers on the porch. Hell, nobody even parked near my unit unless they absolutely had to. At first, I figured it was just because I'm the new guy. It happens, you learn to deal with that kind of thing. But after a few months, one of the guys in my unit, Rodriguez, dropped something in conversation that really stuck with me. We were out in the range requalifying, and during a lull, he looked at me and asked, "You ever hear about what happened in that house before they moved you inside it?" "No," I responded, and that's when he laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he figured somebody should have warned me. Rodriguez didn't say much else right then, he just smiled and shook his head, then got back to loading his mags. That was honestly worse than if he just told me. I couldn't really get it out of my head all day, and when we got back to the barracks, I cornered him in the gear room while we were stowing away our vests. "All right, dude," I said, "spill it. What happened in the house?" He hesitated, checking to make sure nobody else was around, then leaned in and said real low and flat, "There was a baby about a year ago. The dad was a Marine, supposedly had just got back from some god-awful tour overseas. Couldn't adjust. He started seeing things, hearing things. He convinced himself his daughter hated him, that she was rejecting him or something sick like that. One night, he snapped, and they found her body in the bathtub, covered in bruises, burns, and stuff I'm not even gonna say out loud, man. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. They said he tried to make it look like an accident, slipped in the water and maybe hit her head, but the coroner and the JAG did not buy it. Cigarette burns on her feet, bruises on her back. The kid wasn't even 15 months old." Rodriguez was shaking his head. "He's locked up now, life, no parole." I didn't ask the guy's name, I don't want it. Knowing what happened there was already more than I could handle. That night I walked back into that house and it just didn't feel right inside anymore. Before, it was a place to sleep between shifts. Now, I couldn't even look at the walls without wondering what room she died in. I couldn't sit on the toilet without imagining her crying somewhere nearby. That's how your brain works when it's handed a rotten seed. It plants it in the center of your thoughts and lets it fester. I could barely sleep, and the next few days I stayed late at the station, volunteered for extra shifts, avoiding anything to be at that house for too long. I didn't tell anybody about it because, well, what could I say? "Hey, I feel like my house is haunted by ghosts, so I'm gonna stay a little bit longer." Things like that. I couldn't say that. I'd look like a fucking crazy person. Then one night I came home after a double. It was hot even for California. The AC was weak and wheezing, so I opened the windows, grabbed a beer, and sat in the kitchen. It was quiet, really quiet. Not even a single car on the road, no bugs, no wind, just the low hum of the fridge and my own breath. I found myself thinking about that poor baby, what she must have looked like, if she had dark hair or light hair, if she ever smiled. What kind of sick rage you'd need to do all that to your own kid. I opened up another beer and thought about how the military screens for those kind of things, but not the kind of evil that sneaks in when nobody's watching. As I was lost in thought, I heard it. A voice. At first I thought it was somebody outside because it was so faint, like somebody talking behind a closed door. Immediately picked up the remote and muted the TV, even though I know it was already low, and then sat still.
"Why would you do that to me?"
A voice said. A man's voice, strained and raw.
"I didn't want this,"
he cried.
"I didn't mean to."
I stood up slowly, every inch of my skin now covered in goosebumps. It was coming from inside the house, not the vents, not my TV, somewhere inside. I grabbed my sidearm from the bedroom and racked it, walking from room to room, clearing corners like I was back at FLETC. Nothing. Living room clear, bathroom empty, spare bedroom untouched, but I could still hear it.
"Please. I didn't know what I was doing."
He was sobbing now, loudly, like his chest was splitting open. Then suddenly, he was angry again, barking furious. I made it to the hallway and it sounded like it was coming from the laundry room. I flipped the switch. Nothing. Just my washer and dryer and the hot water heater tucked away in the corner. But the voice, it was here. It wasn't loud anymore, just whispering, muttering like it was pacing in a small circle, talking to itself.
"You said you loved me. I didn't mean to hurt you."
I stood there for what felt like a full minute, gun shaking in my hand, heart pounding like a war drum in my ears. Then as quickly as it started, it stopped, cut off like a switch that had been flipped. Not a footstep, not a creak, just gone. I didn't sleep that night. I called in sick the next day. First time I'd done that since joining the Corps. I told them I had food poisoning, something quick and believable, the kind of lie that nobody really pushes back on. Truth was, I couldn't bring myself to go outside. Just sat in the living room, same spot on the couch, gun on the coffee table, staring down the hallway, like it was gonna open up and show me something I couldn't take back. I told myself over and over that I must have been just completely exhausted. That after back-to-back shifts and 2 beers, my brain just kept rewinding that story that Rodriguez told me, replayed it in the worst way possible, you know? But that didn't explain those cold spots that I kept feeling in the hallway. It didn't explain why I kept catching the smell of cigarette smoke in the bathroom, despite living alone and never once smoking a day in my life. That evening, I walked the house again, room by room, turned on every light, opened every closet. And just like the night before, nothing was out of place. No signs of forced entry, no loose vents or busted locks. Just me, and this feeling like I was being watched. Not stalked, not hunted, watched. Literally like something was taking notes of how long I stayed in each room, like it wanted me to feel its presence but didn't want to show itself. I ended up back in the kitchen, same seat, another beer. I didn't touch it, I just stared at the label, picking it apart with my fingernail. I sat there until my legs went numb. The clock ticked past midnight, still nothing. Then, just as I was about to head to bed, I heard it again, a whisper right behind me. "Help me." I spun around so fast that my chair tipped backward and hit the tile. No one. But the air behind me was icy cold. Not chilly, cold, like you left the freezer door open. And it stayed that way for several seconds after, long enough for me to realize that I'm not crazy, long enough to know that I wasn't just hearing things. Something in that house was trying to be heard. Another sleepless night. I sat upright in bed, lights on and gun on my lap. I moved a month later, pulled some strings and got reassigned to a different set of units closer to the main admin side of the base. I told them I was getting migraines from the mold. It didn't matter, they signed off and never really asked me a single question. I never told command about what I experienced either, because what would I say? That I heard the voice of a man crying over something unforgivable? That I smelled smoke from cigarettes nobody had lit? That my own house felt like it was trying to confess something to me? I don't believe in ghosts. Honestly, I still don't, but that house, that place, I feel like it remembers what happened. Every tile, every wall, every nail in the foundation, it held on to it. like bloodstains that never fully got clean, like a scream echoing through the drywall. Those nights made me question everything I thought I understood about guilt, about trauma, about pure evil. I don't care how tough you think you are or how long you've worn that uniform. There are places in this world where some things will linger. Not a spirit, not a demon, just grief. If you sit quietly long enough, that grief will start to whisper to you. Let's cut the shit. I don't care if you believe me, and I'm not trying to sell you some campfire ghost story, but this really happened, and it happened to me. I was stationed with the 405th Army Field Support Brigade, rotating through Poland. They've got a ton of joint operations out there, NATO exercises, vehicle recovery drills, equipment transfers, the works. It's all pretty standard, and most of it runs smooth as hell, but every now and again, they toss you a curveball in the name of field conditioning. And that's how I ended up on a solo survivalist rotation deep in the Polish backwoods. The exercise was simple on paper: navigate from one checkpoint to another. No GPS, just a compass, a map, and your own 2 damn feet. The final destination was an old transient American camp, way out west in the forest near the Czech border. It used to be active during Cold War drills, then NATO used it here and there, but it hasn't seen real action in years. I was told to hike in, spend 2 nights alone and log my observations, then hike back and rendezvous with a Polish liaison officer at the next checkpoint. From there, we'd return back to the main camp, rinse and repeat for the next guy. The hike in wasn't too bad. The terrain was thick with pine and birch, a heavy mist threading through the trees like something out of a storybook. The deeper I got though, the quieter it would get. No wind, no bugs, just the sound of my boots crunching through wet leaves. Occasionally, I'd hear a distant bird song, but it always felt like it cut off far too fast, like something was interrupting it. By the time I reached the camp, I felt like I hadn't seen another human in years, and the place was a skeleton. Empty tents, rolled cots, a few abandoned MRE packets still half buried in the mud. No lights, no noise, just me in the forest and whatever was hiding inside it. I shrugged it off. I'd done worse before. Besides, it was just an old camp in an old forest. Nothing to be scared of. Not yet, anyway. That first night was cold. Not freezing, but that deep kind of damp chill that crawls into your boots and then makes your skin feel like paper thin. I set up my bivy sack underneath the old shelter frame and figured it would keep the dew off. The fire pit had long since collapsed in on itself, so I settled in for a single burner and a pouch of chili mac that tasted like salted paste. I did a quick sweep of the area just to stay sharp and check the perimeter, catalog the layout. The tents were still staked down but moldy as hell. Somebody left behind a stack of field manuals sealed in plastic. That whole place felt like it had been packed up in a rush. I think I bedded down around 2200, but never really truly fell asleep. I kept waking up. At first it was just the wind, or what I thought was the wind. And then I started hearing something else, like crunching through the tree line, slow and deliberate footsteps, far too measured to be an animal, so I sat up and waited. It stopped. Then a whisper came through the dark, just one voice, but I couldn't quite catch the words. Again, I chalked it up to my nerves. When you get alone like that, your brain starts to fill in the silence. Standard head games, you know? So I didn't even bother logging it. I just stayed up until the sky lightened into that early morning Polish gray, and finally let myself breathe again. That second day, though, was worse. I stayed busy during the daylight and logged coordinates, practiced shelter techniques, and ran through drills just to keep myself sharp. But I could have swore I kept seeing people, not clearly, just shapes moving in the mist. I really thought it was tricks of the light, heat differentials, you know, whatever it was, but they all looked the same, dark silhouettes walking parallel through the trees, too far to call out and too uniform in their movements, almost like they themselves were on patrol. By that late afternoon, I was hearing voices again. This time it wasn't whispers though. Talking, clear enough that I should have been able to make out what they were saying, but I still couldn't. It was like I was standing outside a tent while somebody had a conversation inside. You know, the cadence of speech is there, but the words never really come through. At dusk, I found something. Buried underneath one of the tents, beneath this rotted canvas and torn branches, was a boot. Not a military issue one, older, leather-worn gray with age. I pulled it loose and it still had a foot bone inside it. Femur fragment too. I dropped it and stepped back, heart slamming into my chest. I thought about calling it in, but realized I had no comms. This was a solo exercise, no radio until the final checkpoint. So I did the only thing I thought I should do. I buried it, dug a hole with my e-tool, dropped it in and packed it tight like I'd never even been disturbed. I don't want to think about who it belonged to, or even how long it had been there. That night, I heard singing. Not like somebody listening to music, not like a song drifting from some faraway speaker. This was live. Raw voices in the distance, men singing in rhythm and cadence. Not in English though, something older. Slavic maybe? Dozens of them rising and falling like a wave. Marching songs. I lay there, eyes wide open in my bivvy, hand on my knife, waiting for it to stop. And it never did. It only faded with the fog coming in that morning. I packed up fast and skipped breakfast. Every moment felt heavy, like the air itself didn't even want me to leave. The woods now seemed darker than they had when I came in, trees leaning just a little too far inward. I kept hearing snapping twigs behind me, but when I stopped and looked, I wouldn't see anything. Eventually, I reached the checkpoint, an old stone marker next to a dried up creek. There was a man in a Polish uniform, leaning on a walking stick. Looked like he'd been waiting for me. "You are from the American camp, yes?" he asked. "Yeah," I responded. "Just finished the rotation. That place still gets used?" He shook his head. No, not for a long time. That area is, quiet now." I saw people out there in the woods. I thought maybe there were vagrants out there or something." He looked at me for a long time, like he was trying to figure out if I was joking with him or not. Then he said, "You stayed at that camp?" "2 nights." He paled. "They shouldn't have sent you there alone." I stared back at him. "What are you talking about?" He looked away and scanned the woods behind me. That forest, it was used during the war. Polish soldiers, civilians, they were kept there, starved, shot, buried in mass graves. The Nazis didn't want anybody finding it, so they never marked the location, but we know. The land knows. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I didn't have anything to say. He continued on. "Some say those soldiers still march through, that if you listen closely at night you can hear them singing, still waiting to go home." I didn't say another word. I just nodded and adjusted my pack and followed him along that trail. We didn't talk that entire way back. I was far too busy replaying the last 2 nights in my head. Every shape I saw in the mist, every voice that was not mine, every footstep that matched mine beat for beat until I stopped and it didn't. I'd spent 2 nights camped dead center in a forgotten graveyard. I'd eaten meals above buried bones, slept feet away from people who never got a coffin, never got their names back. When the Polish contact said the ground knew, I believed him. I remembered how the forest felt like it was breathing, watching, listening. I remember even how the air changed, how nothing alive made sounds once I crossed that certain tree line. I tried chalking it up to just the isolation or the training stress, or maybe even just being too deep in my own head. But now I know better. I genuinely believe those weren't hallucinations, that it was not my imagination, that it was history bleeding through the cracks in the world, and I stumbled straight into it without even realizing. When we got back to the Polish base, I showered and then changed into a fresh uniform. Didn't say a word during debrief. I handed in my logbook and skipped for the hot chow and went straight to my cot. I think I slept for 12 hours straight, lights on, boots still tied. The next guy in line for the exercise, I pulled him aside the morning of his dispatch, told him to take the long route, skip the old camp, and make something up if he had to. "What do you mean? What's wrong with it?" he asked. I just looked back at him and said, "Honestly, man, as crazy as this sounds, it's a creep show." He laughed like it was a joke, and I didn't tell him otherwise. I've done plenty of field exercises since then, plenty of forest terrain and plenty of solo work, but I've never felt anything like that place again. And honestly, I don't ever want to. I was in the Army from the late 90s into the meat of the Iraq War, which means I got to see the world at its worst and its best, depending on the day. We trained hard stateside, but nothing really truly prepares you for what it's actually going to be like when you're deployed into a hot zone. My unit got sent out in May of 2003, boots on ground, southwest of Baghdad, and right out of the gate, it was pure chaos. And not movie chaos. Not explosions every second, the real kind. The type that creeps up on you while you're pouring water out of a plastic bottle and then there's suddenly a round skipping off a wall 2 feet from your head. By July, we weren't green anymore, and that's when things got weirdly routine. Iraq in the summer hits like a furnace. It cooks your skin right through your gear, and the sand has a way of getting inside your soul. But we all adapted. Learned how to read the streets, how to move without making a target of yourself. Those ambushes would still come though, the IEDs would still hit, but we got into a rhythm. You joke, you smoke, and you stay sharp. Brotherhood becomes oxygen out there. The outpost that we were working at was just outside of Al-Dora, east of Baghdad. It was fortified, sandbag walls and concrete dividers. An old school building half blown apart and repurposed into our command center. No electricity, no AC, no comms unless we were patched in. Nights out there were black. Not dark, black. Like a cave you couldn't touch the walls of. You stare into that kind of nothing long enough and your brain starts to fill it in with shapes. Honestly, we were feeling pretty good around that time. Our sector had quieted down. Intel said the local insurgents were on the run, so we took a day to rest, rotate vehicles, swap out tires and filters. It was a dry, hot afternoon and everybody was dragging ass but still in good spirits. I remember guys joking, radio blaring static-filled country music, someone else cooking god-awful instant noodles over a fuel can stove. I was thinking that night should have been just like the dozen before it, boring, quiet, nothing worth writing home about. But that was the night the sky lit up and every single man inside that outpost stopped breathing. I think it was around 2100 when the first call came through the radio. One of the guards on the north wall keyed in a report, something about a light source in the eastern sky. Not a drone, not a flare, he said. "Bright light, not moving, it don't look right." The radio cut out for a second and then another voice came in. "Post 2, southern overlook." He said he could see it too, same direction, just above the horizon, pulsing steady. None of us were on duty. We were just shooting the shit, sitting on empty ammo crates and dented out Humvee hoods, half buzzed on instant coffee and laughing about some kind of dumb argument from earlier. Somebody made a joke about aliens. Somebody else said it was probably another friendly bird circling in the sky. That's when the platoon sergeant told us to knock it off and go check it out. Nothing official, just get up on the trucks and get a better view. So we did. 4 of us climbed that roof of an old 5-ton, leaned over the edge of the sandbags and stared out east. And then we all stopped laughing. The light wasn't flickering like a fire. It wasn't steady like a star or even a flare, it was pulsing. This dull, slow rhythm that got under your skin. It looked big too, like way too big, and bright, like somebody had taken a whole city and lit it on fire behind the hills. But there was no heat, no wind, no boom, just silence and a glow bleeding through that black sky. For a moment, nobody really said anything. Then Garcia spoke up. His voice was low. "It's not lightning, it's not even in the clouds. Look at it, it's too low." He was right, the thing wasn't in the sky, so much as it was above the earth, just kind of hovering. And it wasn't coming from a single source either. There was no beam, no origin. The light was just there, like it seeped up out of the ground and now was just hanging in the air. My stomach began to knot up, something primal kicking in. I looked around and saw it in the other guys' faces too. Guys who'd kicked in doors in Fallujah, guys who'd run convoy security through ambushes, standing still, staring, mouths tightly shut. Every instinct we built up told us this was not normal. This did not follow any pattern that we've been trained for. I climbed down and walked over to the southern post, which was one of our comm guys was checking out channels for any updates. I asked him if command had said anything to him. "No, nothing," he said. "Radio's been dead quiet. Even SOG's not responding." That made no sense because we always had at least one net live, even if it was just for basic traffic. The longer we stood there, the more obvious it became. Whatever that light was, it was not friendly, and it wasn't something we had words for. I remembered thinking briefly that maybe it was a nuke, or the start of one. That weird silent flash before the blast wave hits, but there was no tremor, no heat, no sound. Just the hum from the radios that felt all too loud now, like they were picking up static from the wrong decade. A few more minutes passed, and the glow stayed there, pulsing, almost daring us to keep watching it. Then, without warning, it started to fade, slowly, like a campfire smothered under a blanket. The edges of the light dissolved at first, then the center, and within seconds, it was gone. Not blinked out, just kind of ceased. We waited, 5, 10 minutes, still nothing. No aftershock, no aircraft, no dust in the air, no call from command. Just blackness again. Sergeant Medina made a round of the outpost after that, checking with every watch post, every guy on duty, and I heard him say the same thing to one another. "You didn't see anything, you didn't hear anything, you keep your mouth shut." Nobody argued. Not because we were scared of him, but because we all knew. Whatever we just saw wasn't meant to be talked about. It felt like it was wrong to speak aloud, like dragging it into the light would make it real again. Later that night, we all had to pretend to sleep, and nobody was joking anymore. No one passed around jerky or MRE bars. We just lay in our racks, eyes open, staring at the tin ceiling of the dark corners of the room, waiting for something else to show up. It never did. But the glow, it still sticks with us, still to this day. The next morning, the sky was a pale smear of beige and heat. Everything felt like it was normal again, like the air was trying to pretend it hadn't seen anything. We went through our motions, gear checks, water fills, another look at the Humvees. I tried to joke around and get a rise out of the guys, but nobody was biting. Everybody was just keeping their heads down. No further reports came in. No mention of unusual activity. Nothing on the news brief. Not even a whisper through the usual scuttlebutt channels. Whatever we saw, either it hadn't registered on any intel radar or somebody high up didn't want it to. Sergeant Medina pulled us together mid-morning, walked slow, like he was chewing on his own words. Then he looked at each of us and said, "What you guys saw last night does not leave this camp. Are we clear? It was a weather anomaly. That's the official line. You breathe a word outside of this wire, it'll be your last report." We all nodded back, every single one of us, but it wasn't fear. That was agreement, a silent pact, because nobody wanted to explain it. How do you explain a light with no source? Silence that would make your skin crawl. How do you explain feeling like something looked back? I served another 2 years after that, saw a lot more blood and a lot more senseless death, but nothing else made me feel the way that night did, small and exposed. I never told anybody about it, at least not until now, because, well, lately, I've been hearing about lights in the sky again, places where they shouldn't be, with that same pulse and that same silence. I don't know what they are. I don't care if it was a weapon, a signal, or something older than both. All I truly know is this: it saw us, and it let us live. And I hope it keeps that up.